everybody, and welcome to this video. I have a treat for you today. I am playing a game that is coming out on Switch in a couple of weeks for preview. This is Story of Seasons, Friends of Mineral Town. It is a remake of a GBA classic, Harvest Moon, Friends of Mineral Town, which released, I think it was 2003 or 2004. And while the names are slightly different for those who haven't been following along with this series, Story of Seasons is Harvest Moon. It's just because of licensing, they've had to change the overall name of the franchise. So it is the same game, and I have been very much looking forward to this because for many people who are die-hard Harvest Moon fans, such as myself, Friends of Mineral Town is regarded right up there. If it's not the very top one, it is very close to the top. And that's a big thing to say because there have been a lot of games in this series, but this one is just particularly well regarded. So what I thought I would do for preview is play the first, one of the first days in the life of an aspiring young farmer. This is day 5 of my career. So you start the game on day 1 of spring. As you can see from the top right hand corner, it is day 5. So it's quite early on. I've not had a chance to do too much at this stage. I'm watering my first crop of potatoes right now. The crop that you see above that is slightly more advanced. Those are the turnips. And as anybody who has played Harvest Moon knows, one of the first things you do is grow turnips because they grow quickly. They start to get your income going, and then you can use that to start to look to buy animals and other crops and stuff. But for the most part, at this point in time in the game, you're still wandering around town, getting to know all the various people, finding the character that you like the most that you may potentially want to marry down the track, because that's a big thing in Harvest Moon. For the record, for me, it's that character there, Ran. She's very cute. I do believe that this game has same-sex marriage implemented into it. That was certainly not the case with the original GBA one, but I think that is the case. I think I read somewhere that that is the case with this one, which is a good step, of course, and it's kind of necessary. I'm playing a girl character, so I'm relying on that if I'm going to marry Ran down the track, which I'm certainly hoping to do. She's my early favourite character. But yes, otherwise, what you're doing at this point in time in the game is just wandering around town, getting the lay of the land, meeting the people, and starting to explore what you can do. What I'm doing right here is having a bath in the hot spring, which recovers your energy. As you can see in the top left-hand corner of the screen, there's a little energy bar. That runs down as you do pretty much anything that has to do with work, whether that's watering plants, sowing new crops, going into the mine, which you'll see a little bit later on in the game. Whatever it is that you're doing, that uses up energy. If you run out of energy, you faint, which is obviously not a good thing. So you want to spend time in the hot spring to keep yourself recovered and able to maximize your use of each day. One of the things that's really great about Story of Seasons right from the start is just how well laid out everything is. There are some Harvest Moon games where the layouts are not nearly as effective. So one that I really loved and spent a lot of time playing but would never consider it one of the top Harvest Moon games was on the Nintendo Wii called Tree of Tranquility. I really loved that game, but the hot spring in that one was way out of the way. You had to go for a long walk to get there to recover and your health, and as a result it became very inefficient and time wasting to do so. So this one, as you saw just then, the hot spring is a really critical resource, and it's only a couple of steps away from your home, so you can easily drop in there even a couple of times throughout the day to recover your energy as you need to. The town itself is also very well laid out. The shops are nice and close. It's very easy to get anywhere in this town, and even though it is fairly bustling with people, there's never the sense that you are a long way away from whoever you want to meet up with or talk with, or if you need to go and buy seeds and whatever, you can do so quite easily. And that's all important because the game does have a daily clock, which does wind down in real time. So if you, and all the various characters have their own daily routines. The shops have set hours that they're open and closed. So if you need to get seeds and it's midnight, you can't do that. You need to wait for the next day, which is why it's so important that the town is laid out nicely, that you can get anywhere you need to quite quickly. So you can get your shopping done, you can still do your chores and work, and not feel like you're spending too much time walking around aimlessly, or not even necessarily aimlessly. You're not spending too much time just walking around trying to get to the next thing that you need to. So with all of that said, one of the reasons that the game has that time clock feature is not to put pressure on people in terms of their time, but to get them into a routine. If you consider that each day takes about 20 minutes to play, as I'm showing you here, by playing through a single day, it takes about 20 minutes. If you consider that each month is about 30 days long, and there's 4 months, which are seasons, over the course of a year in a Harvest Moon game, you're looking at 120 days, each one at 20 minutes. If you spent too long with that kind of daily routine, it would get very tiring very quickly, especially since a Harvest Moon game runs over a couple of years. So the reason that the developers have put that time clock in there is not to pressure you or to make you feel like you're in a rush to do things, which is the case with some other games that have time clocks. It's more just to get you in a rhythm of things. So you'll get up early in the morning, you'll go and do your crop watering, you'll maintain your animals once you have them, you'll brush down your cow, you'll do the milking, and you'll collect the eggs from the chickens. You'll do all those little bits and pieces, and then you'll get on with the rest of your day, whether that's going shopping for new equipment, ducking into the mines to get the ore which you need to upgrade your equipment so you can be even more efficient with your use of time, or just hanging out with the locals and flirting with whoever you want to make your spouse. The rhythms that this game sets up nice and early are really quite a compelling loop. So the thing that I always find when I start a Harvest Moon game is for the first couple of days, they're actually the most awkward in the entire game. And it's not because they're difficult. There's certainly no challenge in Harvest Moon. It's a little bit like Animal Crossing, in the sense that these are hyper casual games where you're not designed to ever lose. There's no lose state as such. But the first couple of days are a little bit awkward because you're still not in that rhythm. And because you're not in that rhythm, you do feel like you're kind of rushing around. You're not quite sure where things are, but you want to get things done. So it just feels a little bit awkward. And I think that with any Story of Seasons game, they should look a little bit better at introducing people to the rhythms, especially since this one is a remake of a classic game. And because of that, its onboarding process is even less efficient than other ones. But once again, that only takes a couple of days, and once you're into the rhythms, you find yourself just kind of relaxing and just enjoying the game for what it offers. Another thing that I really love about Harvest Moon, or Story of Seasons, or whatever you want to think of this game, is I can't get Harvest Moon out of my head while I'm playing it. But another thing that I really love about it is the way it has these little emergent storytelling bits. So the game's characters are all quite broadly written and very simple, and that's done by design because they don't want you to spend hours and hours talking to characters. But because of that, there is a thinness to each of the characters in terms of writing, and they just tend to be quite caricature in design. So right now we're seeing a cutscene with 2 gossipy housewives, and then the subject of their attentions, which is the boy that's down screen a little bit, Brandon. He is the artist type, so he's a little bit of a romantic soul and a little bit of a... he's a bit of a cool dude, really. I quite like Brandon. If I wasn't already... if I didn't already have my heart set on Ran, then Brandon would be my boy. But those characters are all very simply written, and it's really up to the player to fill the gaps and create their own little stories about them as they go along. The game gives you just enough to start to build a broader character in your own head, and then it's your experience with the game where you kind of get the narrative thrust. And I really like that about the good Harvest Moon games. They all do that. They don't try and overwrite things. They try and keep things quite simple and elegant and just let you create your own story. But at the same time, they're a little bit more in-depth than an Animal Crossing. And I always like to think of Animal Crossing as... it's a wonderful game, and I love them, and I think they're amazing, especially this new one that's out on Nintendo Switch. It's a couple of months old now, but the one that everybody's been playing on Switch and it's been selling like crazy. That game has introduced a lot of people to this kind of hyper casual experience. I think Harvest Moon is the natural next step. It has slightly more in terms of objectives, in that you do want to grow crops, you do want to make money, because you want to use that money to buy cows and whatever. And there's an actual gameplay loop and process about that. Whereas with Animal Crossing, it is really just kind of picking up oranges or digging things out of the ground when you come across them. It's not as deliberate. It's more just a organic accumulation of funds in Animal Crossing. Whereas with Harvest Moon, it is much more a deliberate gameplay loop. But at the same time, it is certainly a no-pressure gameplay loop, and I think that people who enjoyed Animal Crossing, who maybe have never looked at a Harvest Moon or Story of Seasons game, because they are that kind of niche thing, and they're not exactly marketed by any means outside of Japan, if they even are marketed in Japan, you kind of, unless you're in the gaming industry, unless you're actually following game websites and whatever, you probably don't even know these games exist. But if you get a chance to play one, then I certainly think that Story of Seasons, Friends of Mineral Town is a good place to start. A lot of people are out there playing these hyper-casual games because of Animal Crossing. I think that they'll find that this is a good next step or a good next thing to play in case they are starting to get a little bit tired of the loops of Animal Crossing. Now, I can't remember if Friends of Mineral Town actually does have a great overarching objective that it hits you with later down the track. I've played so many of these games now, they all roll together. There have been times where the series has experimented with objectives in a very broad sense. So there was one on the PSP and PlayStation 2, and I can't even remember the name of it, where you inherited a farm at the start of the game and you were told you had 3 years to make it profitable, else an amusement park was going to come in and roll over everything. That farm was your grandfather's farm, so of course naturally you want to do what you can to preserve it. That was an example of a Harvest Moon with an overarching objective. Now that was not a difficult objective to meet by any means. 3 years is a long time in game. It was no effort whatsoever really to earn the money that you needed to save the farm. But there was that sense that, you know, you did have to work towards something. At the moment, the point of time I'm in, and I've only played about 2 weeks beyond this point in the gameplay that I'm actually doing myself, but of the first couple of weeks of time in Friends of Mineral Town, there isn't that overarching objective at all. Really, you've just been dropped into this farm and told to have some fun, earn some money, and just enjoy the farming life. So I'm hoping it stays that way. I prefer Harvest Moon when it doesn't have that overarching objective and I can just do things on my own time, but I'm not entirely sure right now. So now we're in the mine. Now the mine is a little bit of a roguelike element as such. What you do is you smash up the rocks and you may get ore from them, just like I did there. And that ore you can use to upgrade your equipment and sell as well. You can make money from doing the mining. But where the roguelike bit comes in is once you've cleared away all the rocks, you can then start to dig. And eventually you will dig up a ladder that takes you further down. The further down you go, the more resources you get and the better quality resources. So once you get down to the level 3 or so, you'll start to get silver ore, which you can use to get better equipment. But of course, you are managing this against the rapidly depleting energy levels that you have as well. So at the start, you really can't dig down too far anyway because you just haven't got the energy to do so. But as you upgrade your equipment and get more energy, then you can get further down. You can also start to cook food for yourself, which you can use to replenish energy while on the go. One of the good things about this game, and the reason that it's not a time pressure game by any means, even though it does have a clock, is once you're inside a building or a mine, the time stops. So as you can see right now, it's 5:20 PM. It stays 5:20 PM until I leave the mine. So the developers didn't want you to feel like you're time pressured. And once again, I know that some people feel like when there's a real-time clock ticking down, there is that time pressure element, and that can be quite stressful. For example, one of my favorite JRPG series is the Atelier series. And those games have at times experimented with clocks that tick down. And I know a lot of people actually find those games difficult, not in terms of being challenging, but because they always feel like they're pressured into doing things as quickly as possible. That was never the intention in Harvest Moon, but as I mentioned earlier in the video, if they didn't have some kind of clock with daily routines and whatever, you wouldn't get into a loop. You wouldn't get into a rhythm with the game, which allows you to play it for quite the length of time that it asks you to. Because the game splits things down into these kind of 20-minute blocks, it is actually very easy to just let yourself play, and before you know it, you're a couple of weeks and months into the game. That brings me to the next point I wanted to make, and this game is absolutely perfect for the Nintendo Switch and play on the go, because you can play it for 20-minute periods of time. To again compare it to Animal Crossing, I find that Animal Crossing is a real time sink. It's not because you feel like you're pressured to play for long periods of time. It's because you end up playing for long periods of time, because every time you turn that thing on, you want to go and interact with all the animals. You want to get some resource collection done. You want to shake down the trees, catch some bees, do some fishing. And it's actually very difficult to play for short periods of time because there is no sense of progress in Animal Crossing. There's that broad goal to buy houses and get money to invest in things and fill your houses with stuff. But there's no sense of micro development within the game. Whereas this one, because you play at 20-minute blocks, and at the end of that 20-minute blocks, it's the end of the day, you can tick over to the next one. It's very easy to play for just 20-minute periods of time. You just say, oh, I'll get through one day's play, when you've got a small block of time spare, whether it's a break or whatever, just before bed at night. And it is a very easy way to just use up 20 minutes. And that's a real strength of Harvest Moon, that there's never that pressure to play for longer than a day's period. And you always feel like you've made some kind of meaningful progress in a single day's play or a single session's play. You've ticked the calendar over a couple of days, you've maybe participated in a festival, you've learnt a new recipe, you've upgraded a little bit of equipment, you've just grown some new crops and made some money. There's always those kind of micro progressions that really make every moment that you play Harvest Moon feel worthwhile. So anyway, this is almost the end of the day now. I'm just hanging out in the pub after a hard day's work, mostly to flirt up with Ran. Like I said, she's the daughter of the innkeeper, and the romance system in this game is not too complex, because as you can imagine, if it was too gamey, then it would frustrate people who maybe like a particular character but can't work out how to woo them. With this game, you just need to interact with those characters a little bit, talk to them a couple of times, give them little presents here and there, and they slowly kind of come to love you as such. So it's certainly not a dating simulator by any means. It's more about just finding your favorite character and just hanging out with them, really. So for me, that's going to be Ran, I think, unless I discover later on that I'd read wrong and same-sex marriage isn't the thing in Harvest Moon, or sorry, Story of Seasons, Friends of Mineral Town, but I'm pretty sure it is. So the pub closes at 9 PM, and after that, at this stage in the game, there's not much else you can actually do. I had to leave the pub in order to let time tick over, so a couple more patrons come along. As I mentioned, time stops when you're in a building, and I wanted to hang out with some more people. So what I tend to do is wait till about 8:50 PM now, and at 8:50 PM, everybody's that's coming to the pub that night are there. I hang out with them a bit, I have a chat, and then I go home. I'm sure later down the track there'll be other activities I can get up to late at night, but because you want to be in that rhythm anyway, and it's not a good idea to stay up until too late, because then you're tired the next day, the game again encourages you to get into that kind of loop where once it gets to late night, then you're ready to hang up your tools for the day and hit the sack. So the last thing I do is just watch some TV. There's some little skits in there which are good fun, and yet more flavor text, which really helps to build the game. So it's all very lovely, very delightful. Look forward to my review on digitallydownloaded.net not next week. It's a couple of weeks till embargo lifts on reviews, but I'm really loving this game. I think it's wonderful. I think it's an excellent Harvest Moon Story of Seasons game, and a real highlight on the Switch so far this year in this early stage. Thanks as always for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoy my videos, that way you won't miss any. Click the little bell and you'll get notifications each time a new one goes up, and I do put them up pretty often, so yeah, you won't miss a video that way. Please do consider backing me on Patreon if you do enjoy my videos, because that will allow me to invest more into the YouTube channel. And also, if you do enjoy visual novels, please consider picking up some of the visual novels that I have written and published, because not only do you get a game to play then, but you also get to support everything that we do. Thanks as always, really appreciate having your company. Hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you at the next video.